people who knew murderers, when did you know something was off? I moved to a new town when I was 19 and was making new friends at my new job. I met this girl at work and she invited me over to hang out with her and her best friend. I went and the best friend's boyfriend was there and the vibes were way off. I was uncomfortable. He was cold, and just seemed angry for no reason. They had mentioned to me before he got there that he was always controlling and had hit the girl before. Turns out controlling was an understatement. She came home one day and he was digging a hole in the backyard and she asked what he was doing and he replied, "Digging your grave." He hit her, said if he can't have her, nobody could have her, all of that. So eventually she left him and had to get a restraining order and everything. He somehow persuaded her to get in a car with him on her work break and they went missing for a few days. Turns out he stabbed her to death, threw her in a river and killed himself. I met the girl only a few times and him only the once, but the face that I was in such close proximity to someone capable of that gives me chills. She was so young, it was really sad. The murderer I know was more of an acquaintance or casual friend. He lived down the hall from me and we hung out sometimes, but not like just the two of us. Still, we'd chill at each other's place regularly. I passed him one day in the stairwell and I said hi. He said hi back but called me by the wrong name. He was really distracted and kind of awkward. He didn't make eye contact and kept moving. I remember thinking maybe we don't know each other as well as I thought. Later he was playing Nintendo, yep, my N64, this was a while ago, with my roommate when I came home. He apologized and said his mind was elsewhere. A couple days later there are cops all over the building, interviewing people and searching his place. They'd found the guy's roommate with a bullet in the back of his head in an abandoned lot across town. The next day he confessed. There was a kid I went to high school with who always gave me the creeps. We had a lot of mutual friends so we always ended up hanging out and it always made me feel really uncomfortable. Our senior year he got suspended for like a week because someone had found and turned in a hit list he had made. No one really took it too seriously. About 3 years after we graduated he was in the news for murdering a man in our town that he barely knew. He told the police that he held the man's eyes open so he could watch his life leave his body. He was the sweetest, kindest, gentle giant kind of guy. Kind of a weirdo, but still a great guy overall. I remember once that he shed a tear just by talking about his kid, because he was so filled with emotion from having him in his life. He turned out to kill his wife, kidnap his child, start the longest Amber Alert in the history of Canada. As he tried escaping to a different province he killed another man to steal his car. I'm still unsure today if I should have seen anything at any point. It comes to haunt my nightmares from time to time. I went through primary and high school with a guy in the year below me who seemed a little distant. We lived near each other and caught the bus from the same stop. He was a bit of a bully, but it was something more. Like you could tell he wasn't a bully because he was hurting inside or because he felt threatened in some way. He was a bully because he did what he wanted to do and didn't realize that it hurt other people. Like the kind of kid who enjoyed pulling wings off flies. Not long after I left my hometown I heard that he had been charged with the murder of a 2-year-old. Apparently his girlfriend at the time left her daughter with him for an hour or so while she ran an errand. He couldn't deal with the toddler crying anymore so he beat her. He caused severe internal bleeding and she died in hospital not long after. He would have been around 22 when he did it. He was sentenced to 36 years with a non-parole period of 27 years. When he came looking for me because I was the only one that knew of the abandoned mine we both found when exploring as kids. It had been years since we had talked and he suddenly showed up looking for me. He killed his roommate because he was gay and made a pass at him. Dumped the body in the mine in Boulder County, Colorado. My bio dad ended up murdering my stepmom. Everyone in my family, my mom and 2 older brothers definitely knew that something was up. He had severe anger issues and was very abusive. Some of the earlier memories I have are of him choking one of my brothers. He even almost choked my mom to death a couple of times. Obviously my mom was smart and divorced him as he didn't want to see him kill my brothers. Years later I come home from school and my mom and stepdad take us all to the side and tell us he shot our stepmom and was currently in jail. None of us were surprised. If anything, I was just so grateful my mom left him. It's so strange that I am directly related to a murderer. A great-uncle shot one of my great-great-uncles for trying to fondle, or rape, another family member. Turns out everybody was tired of his shit, so the killing was never reported. Nobody quite knows where the body is buried, but my guess is that he threw it into the river. We were a dictatorship at the time, so seeing bodies flushed down the river was not uncommon. Honestly, this girl I went to school with killed 2 kids she babysat and their mother. Before that, I would have told you she was one of the calmest, coolest people in our school. Would have never suspected her to do something like that. Sat next to him in choir class. He was always kind of off. He operated on his own wavelength. Constantly in his own world, never really engaging with anybody. People just didn't really exist on his radar. On a class trip we slept in the same hotel room and he walked around naked like I wasn't even there. I always assumed he was autistic, but in hindsight it might have been something much worse, like schizophrenia. He never seemed violent, but nobody ever talked to him enough to ever make that conclusion in the first place. A few months ago he beat and stabbed his mother to death with a kitchen knife. It was so bad dental records were needed to identify the body. He cut off one of her breasts and implied in his confession that he ate part of it. He waited until his dad came home from work to show him what he'd done. Claimed he saw a sign from the devil that told him to kill her. That may have been a lie. From what I heard he was very excited to tell the police what he had done. And from what I do know about him, he might have said it for the attention. He turned himself in, waived his Miranda rights, and confessed to everything. When the cops found him he was literally soaked in blood. He refused to wash it off, so they had to hose him down before they put him in a cell. He's looking at 40 years in prison. His mom was an amazing woman. She tailored our suits for choir and was constantly volunteering. If there was an event, she was there. She was gonna be her town's councilwoman next year. She loved her son very much. She didn't deserve to die like that. I just realized that I have 2 scenarios that are similar enough to mention. 1. I went to the same high school as the chick who gained infamy in the US for convincing her boyfriend to kill himself and then running all these charity events for him before getting caught. The text messages were public record and absolutely chilling. I think she ended up getting off with manslaughter, but the case is being appealed and will likely go to the Supreme Court. She was extremely forgettable in high school. 2. While I was in college I worked in the bookstore over the summers. I worked with a guy there who was a decent guy but always a little weird. He'd make inappropriate comments about some of the students that would come in for books etc. but seemed harmless. He ended up being charged for attempted murder after stabbing his wife multiple times. I believe an affair was involved. The only reason the poor women lived was because a construction worker saw the attack and intervened, so shout out to that guy for having balls of steel. Well, attempted murderer. He attacked his dad with a hammer. He was one of my best friends growing up. I couldn't see it, but my parents did. They always said something seemed off. I only began to see it in my early 20s. There was just something off behind his eyes. He was very impulsive and keen to take big risks. Last I heard he's in the state mental hospital indefinitely. Looking back, I should have known immediately, but I didn't even know what I was seeing. In 2016, I was working as a server, and one of my co-workers was always complaining about her shitty husband and how they always fought. They were from Chicago, and kind of just always loud and aggressive, so I didn't think much of it. One night, they both came in for dinner and drinks and sat in my section, and I was looking forward to finally meeting her husband so I could give him a face. I just remember not being able to look him in the eye, feeling super uncomfortable any time I needed to go over to their table, because my friend would try to spark convo, and I wanted to talk to her, but the guy's presence just sitting there would make my skin crawl. They left that night, but soon she stopped coming to work, and then, a couple weeks later, news broke about the murder-suicide, husband being the murderer. It was heartbreaking, and I no longer take lightly word of domestic disputes. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.